We want to introduce you to Dana Goldstein. This is her book, The Teacher Wars, A History of America's Most Embattled Profession. Ms. Goldstein, when did the concept of public education come into being in the States?
You know, previous to about 1830, we did not have public schools in the United States as we would conceive of them today. It was really up to individual groups of neighbors, perhaps churches, to come together and start schools if that was something that they wanted to do. All that changed in the 1830s with the Common Schools movement. It was a group of reformers that went state to state and made the argument we need to raise taxes at the state level. We need to tell parents it's not your choice. You have to send your kids to school. And between about 1830 and the years after the Civil War, each state embraced the idea of a universal public education, which was new at the time.
Was there resistance to that idea?
Yes, there was, and unsurprisingly, a lot of the resistance was because this was expensive. And one of the early compromises that was made in order to make this affordable, which is one of the stories I tell in the book, was bringing female teachers into the classroom. In 1800, 90% of school teachers were male, and by 1900, 76% were female. And of course, we know today over 3/4 remain female. So one of the big reasons why this was done is because folks were saying, look, we like the idea of public education. We don't want to pay that much for it. At the time, wage discrimination was not against the law, and you could pay female teachers half as much as a male teacher.
How many public school educators are there today in the United States?
3.4 million.
And what's their average salary?
The median salary is $54,000 per year.
And can they, where do they start? Does it range from state to state? Give us some statistics.
It ranges a lot from state to state. In New York City, where I live, a teacher with 30 years of experience can make a six-figure salary, which sounds really great. The secret is how long it takes to get there. You know, teachers, they don't get to have big jumps in salary over the course of their 20s and 30s like many other white-collar professionals do. Most of them have to wait a very long time. In North Carolina, for example, the starting salary for a teacher is $30,000. To advance to $40,000, one has to work for 15 years. So we're talking about being in your mid to late 30s before you would even make $40,000 in the great state of North Carolina. So there's big variation across the country. Urban areas, suburban areas, often big variations. But overall, it's not pay that's commensurate with other jobs that often require a master's degree, as high school teaching does in most states.
Are private schools on a different scale?
Private schools actually tend to pay less in many regions. I think part of the reason why is because in many cases the job may be a little easier. There's fewer kids living in poverty, and not as many sort of social challenges that our public schools face.
When you look at the figures, how much are we spending on public education in the U.S. today?
I don't have that ballpark figure off the top of my head. What I do know is that we spend more per pupil on average than our competitor nations. So we often hear a lot about the schools in South Korea, Japan, Finland. We actually spend a little more than they do, and our outcomes are mediocre. Our kids are about average in reading. They're below average in math. And so I often get the question, where does the money go to in our system? You know, we have quite generous pensions and health plans for public school teachers. One of the reasons why is we don't have a big social safety net that provides for people's health care and their retirements provided by government in this country. So teachers have fought for that to offset the relatively low pay that we were talking about, and the history of how teachers unions have achieved some of that is a story I tell in the book.